Good morning and welcome to our very first episode in our spooky series with the Division of Parks and Watercraft. I'm Alyssa Yapel and I'm going to be moderating today with my coworker Jenna, who I'm going to pop on the screen so she can give you a quick wave and say hello.
Good morning. Thanks for joining us today.
And then also Rochelle, who's going to be presenting in just a minute. There's Rochelle. And so if you're looking for a place to take a haunted hike or a spooky stay for a night, we are going to tell you where to go at our Ohio State parks. And the temperature's dropped lately, but I promise you the chills that you might get today aren't going to be because of the temperature. So we have an awesome series coming up for you. Today, Rochelle is going to talk about Punderson State Park and Beaver Creek State Park. Next week, we're going to shift to spiders. We have a spiders webinar. You see what I did there? Sorry if that's too corny. And then haunted history of Malabar is the following week. Then we're going to talk about bats that aren't as spooky as you would think. And we'll tell you why. And last but not least, we have a Sasquatch special that we will be doing on the 30th. So if you would like to watch any of those, please go to our Facebook page. In the meantime, today, while Rochelle is doing her program, please feel free to ask us any questions by utilizing the Q&A. We would love to hear from you. So let us know if you have any questions for Rochelle, but I'm going to pass it to her now. Here you go, Rochelle.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome. I am currently here at Punderson State Park Manor, and behind me you can actually see the Punderson Lake. And I'm going to talk to you about the history of this area and why there are some spooky things going on in this manor that we have. So bear with me as I walk a little bit. I do want to give you guys the full view of this amazing manor that is behind me. And it just has a really spooky vibe to it. And that is because there are several ghost stories that happen here. Mr. Punderson fell in love with this area. He loved the big lake, that gorgeous lake back there, and he called it the Big Pond. And he thought that he could utilize this lake by powering the mill that he had with the water that was a reservoir in the pond. So he fell in love with this area. He built a cabin, a mill, and he proceeded to make a life here. Now, Mr. Punderson did fall ill, and he did pass away. So it's said that sometimes that you could see him walking the hallways, or you can see his wife rocking chairs at times. She had a favorite rocking chair that used to be on the porch, and it's said that sometimes you can hear her say, "Where's my rocking chair?" So that's really neat. Some more history is that after Mr. Punderson died, Mr. William Cleveland bought the property. He fell in love with this area when he was a little boy. Across the lake there is where our campground is. And back in the day, Mr. Wales had a 2-story hotel over there. And it was a nice little recreation spot for the Clevelanders to come down and visit and kind of get out to country. So he had his awesome hotel over there, and people from Cleveland would hop on the train and they would come down, and this lake was spectacular. It was nothing like the big city life. So it was said that the hotel did burn down, which is really unfortunate because Mr. Cleveland loved it. So when this land became for sale after the Pundersons, he bought it up in a hurry. He loved this place. He turned it into a bird farm for his bird dogs. So he had pheasants and turkey and all kinds of bird game animals here. He also had buffalo and elk. So it was a really neat farm that he had here. And we could still see some of the old pasture lines that we have here in the park if you walk the trails. So Mr. Cleveland loved this place. And where the manor is today, this was actually known as the Big House. It overlooked the lake, or the Big Pond, as we all used to know it as. And he just loved this place so much. When the hotel across the pond did burn down, there were some children inside of it that did not make it, unfortunately. And that's the cool part. We're going to walk inside our manor today. And it is said that these children actually enjoy our local manor. So sometimes at night, you can hear children's footsteps down the small hall in the old manor. The manor has 2 sections. It has a new section that the state of Ohio built on when we took over the property and turned it into a state park. And then it also has the old big house side. So we're going to go inside and explore. Try to show you some of it and try not to make you sick as I walk. But this building is just beautiful. The grounds are wonderful right now. It's a little bit chilly, fall colors. I do have a couple of storm clouds above me, so it just has that really spooky feeling. And I really love the entryway. The front of it is just, it's so cool. I highly encourage people to come visit and stay the night in our lodges. This is one of my favorites. We will be going inside, so I will be wearing my mask just because we're inside, and until I get to my library. So like I said, it has really neat features outside. I don't know if you can see the gargoyle back there. It's really cool. Just a really pretty manor house. So let's go inside. So like I said, this manor house is very pretty. We open up into like the foyer where you see a magnificent fireplace behind me. We do have a spiral staircase, which we're going to go up. And it said that during their haunted tours that they do here, that if you take pictures, that you sometimes get some cool orbs, or even orbs that kind of float and move around nicely. It's not like a dust particle. Go up these stairs.
And Rochelle, for any of those that don't know, what does an orb sometimes represent in a photo?
Ball.
Oh. Are you there, Rochelle?
Can you hear me?
Oh, there you are. You're back.
Sorry. It's just a ball of light that is captured in a picture. So I don't know if you can see the stairway. It's really cool. We're in the old part. So we have this really creepy hall, is what a lot of visitors like to say, because it kind of feels like a castle in a way. It's kind of small, and you walk back down it. So this is the hallway. Now that I'm away from folks, this is the hallway that people hear children running down. And we're going to go into the library, which is another area where people hear things. It's a quaint little library. And we'll talk a little bit more about some of the ghostly encounters that they have here. Back when we were renovating the place, when we took it over in 1948, the manager had to do his nightly rounds to make sure that everything was locked up and that there was nobody left in the building. And it said that he would hear things and see things. Doors would just magically open. Cupboards would shut and close by themselves. So it's really, really unique. Amazingly, last year I had the opportunity to stay here during my 75 state parks in 10 days. And it was on Halloween, and I was super excited. I really wanted to have my own encounter, so I'd have my own story to tell. But unfortunately, I didn't see anything or hear anything, but I was exhausted. I've been told by visitors that they've had that feeling like somebody's watching you, or that somebody has sat on the edge of their bed, but there's nobody there. They've also reported that the remotes don't work, so they couldn't turn the TVs on. and that the TVs would just turn on at night, like in the middle of the night, talking about like 1, 2 o'clock at night, and they would just come on and then turn off. They also heard people in the hallway, but they were the only guests, so there's nobody else here, so it was weird. They did go to the front desk and ask if there was anybody in the hallway, and they're like, nope, it's just you guys in your room and me down here. So there's all kinds of fun, cool stories that happen here. The other park that I'm going to be talking about today is Beaver Creek. And I'm going to try to share my screen with you guys. And during this time of the year, I love doing night hikes or evening hikes. And is it showing? It is? Good deal.
Yes, it's coming up.
And a part of the thing that I loved when I worked at Beaver Creek was walking Von der Green Trail back to some of the spooky locks in the area with all their fun ghost and history stories. Is that up yet?
Sorry, yeah, it is.
Okay. So, as you can see, this is Hamilton Mill. It is located at Beaver Creek State Park's campground, or group camp. And this mill alone is really, really spooky. It just has that creepy, creepy vibe. This used to be the town of Spruceville, and this was one of the mills in the area. And this mill has said, people have said that they've seen orbs here when they take pictures, when they do the EPV, which is a cool little app that you can get on your phone for free. They have ghosts talking back to them. It is said that some of our famous ghosts like Gretchen and Esther Hale can be seen around this mill as well. It's just a spectacular mill. And when it gets darker, it's even creepier. This area is very remote, so cell service is horrible. You rarely get it. If you do get it, you only have it for a few seconds, and then it's gone. And when it gets dark, it is dark. It's pitch black down there. East Liverpool is the closest town, and it's probably good 10-15 minutes from there. 10 minutes, I would say. So there's no light pollution from any nearby towns. So, and you're kind of in a gorge, like a valley. So it's very isolated. And this mill was actually restored by the Friends group. So they restored its shell, per se, so the stonework on the outside and the roof, just so people can come and visit it. We do encourage people to visit, but please remember that we are at a historical landmark in the area, so please don't destroy our buildings and to pick up after yourself. You can see as I zoom into the inside of it, people have pulled the bars apart. There is no need to go inside. You can see plenty from the outside, but the water used to run through this part of the mill, and it would run the grist mill, so it would turn all the wheels. But it's just a spooky feeling inside there. People have reported seeing a lot of orbs or EPV like spiking on their apps, going crazy, and then sometimes they talk back. Like if you ask who's here, it'll say Gretchen. So it's really neat. Nice little bit of history here in our park. Beaver Creek has a lot of history. The canal, Sandy and Beaver Canal, used to go through our park. And this is the towpath on part of it, walking to this Hamilton Mill, and I thought it was really cool. But along this canal, we can actually see lots of old locks and dams remnants on the path, as well as old foundations of the homesteads that used to be built along the canal. Canals were the means of transportation back in the early 1800s, or the 1830s, 1840s, and 50s. It was a lot easier to move goods by boat, canal boat, rather than a wagon. Wagons had to deal with ruts and mud and all kinds of hassles of a trail. So they decided to build canals, and we were lucky enough to get the Sandy and Beaver Canal to come through our park. It does connect to the Ohio and Erie Canal, which would connect Cleveland all the way down to the Ohio River. So it was a very important canal system. And the mill was built there, and there was 12 other houses in this area as well. And with that being said, we're actually going to go for a walk here in a second. That's an old lock right there that I was talking about. This one can actually be seen in the main camp. We also have historical rocks with like information on how the canals worked and the interesting story of the history of Sprucevale. Like I said, it was 12 houses, but I love to take people on this trail. So I wanted to film it beforehand and take you on a virtual hike back to Gretchen's Lock. So this is Von der Green Trail, and it is part of the North Country Scenic Trail. So it has blue blazes or orange or blue rectangles that you can follow along this trail that will lead you back to Gretchen's and then also to the main park. So it's a really neat trail. It walks the bottom of the gorge next to the Little Beaver Creek, which is a scenic and wild, national scenic and wild river. So it's really neat. There's lots of insect sounds when you're walking through here. Amazingly, my phone brightened it up a lot. It was a little bit darker than what it is right now. But as the evening falls, your senses become alive. Your sight diminishes and all your other senses start to come alive. So I like to have people like try to like smell the area. The fall scent is amazing right now down there. Try to listen more. Like I said, you have a lot of katydids in the background. When we do get closer to the lock, there's actually an eastern screech owl that is hooting back and forth to us, which is really unique. Usually I get the barred owls that call back and forth, but this day I had eastern screech owls, so that's really cute. And then I also like to have them use the sense of smell, not really taste because you can't really taste the air, but just the see, the feel, the touch. As we're walking this gorge, there is, right now it would be nice and warm, but we do come to an open spot where it gets a little chilly and the hairs on your back of your neck kind of stand up. This could be from the changing air, but a lot of the time it's from your body reacting to the adrenaline in your system because it's very creepy down here and you feel like somebody's watching you. This area, like I said, has lots of locks and canals. There is a lock further down past Gretchen that is known as Jake's Lock. And the story behind that one is that Jake was the guard lock, the lock guard. So he had a house by Jake's Lock, and he would make sure that the lock was okay. After a storm, he went out, or actually during a storm, he went out to the lock to make sure it wasn't flooding and to let any water, extra water out if need be. Unfortunately, he got struck down by lightning and died. So it is said that during stormy nights or days where the weather looks a little bit rough, that you can actually see his lantern at night, like walking back and forth on top of the lock to make sure that it is good and that it's not going to fail. So that's really neat, just because you have to travel so far back this path that there's usually nobody else on the path. Like you might cross paths with other visitors once or twice, but for the most time it's you and the woods and that's it. So if you see a random light, it's kind of spooky. And then when you get closer, it disappears. Other tales of this area are of Esther Hale. And Esther Hale was a bride-to-be. And unfortunately, her husband, or her groom's bride, never made it to the altar. She had her friends and family all over, and they were waiting for her to get married, and at 10 o'clock on August 12th, and he never showed. And she's like, let's give it a while and maybe he'll come. 10:30, still no groom. And the townsmen and folk are kind of getting antsy. They're like, okay, what's the deal here? And she's like, just give it time, he'll come. Noon comes and there's still nobody. Everybody's like, okay, we've been waiting for 2 hours, we're going home. So they ended up packing up their things and they left. She was so distraught that it was said that she didn't take off her wedding dress. She kept it on went home, closed the blinds like it was a funeral, and was never really seen. Like, she just moped around. It was said that she took all the food back home, and that, like, if you did visit, like, they would have like bugs crawling all over them. Like, she didn't touch it. She was very distressed and disoriented, heartbroken for being stood up at the altar. And nobody knows what happened to her groom. Other stories have it that he went to war and that he died and never made it back. But it's said that during August 12th, of the night of her anniversary, that you can actually see her walking down the road by the mill in her white wedding dress. And then also on the bridge right next to our mill there, she will stand in the middle of it. And as soon as you get close to her, she just disappears. Other legends say that if you do get close to her, and if she does touch you, it's like the deathly touch, and that she kind of gets rejuvenated that way. So it's really spooky. We do have a lot of ghost hunters and reenactors that like to come down on August 12th to our park to go out searching for Gretchen. They use their EPVs and all kinds of devices, and they try to talk to her, they try to see her. Others are dressed in white gowns, which can kind of be spooky. We have a story with an officer who was down there one night, and mind you, our radios don't really work well in the area as well. So it's very sketchy. Most officers don't like to go down there too much at night, but they do because it's their job. But it was said that he was actually parked on our road at the front of it, watching the road, the traffic, people going through, and nobody was coming through, and it was just a dark, calm night, and all of a sudden he had a bride standing at his window. He's like, I don't know where she came from. She just appeared just like that, just popped out of nowhere. And he's like, I had to think, like, am I seeing something? Is this one of those reenactors? Like, what's going on? So he just gradually winds down his window and goes, can I help you? And it turns out that she was an actor. She's like, I was supposed to be picked up and nobody came to pick me up, and my car is at the top of the hill. Can you give me a ride? So in the back of his mind, he's thinking, okay, I'll give her a ride. But then he's also thinking, is this a ghost like pulling my leg? So he's kind of, weary on that aspect. But it ends up that she was in fact a reenactor, so he did give her a ride up to the top of the hill. Other officers have reported like weird shadows creeping out from behind trees down there. So every once in a while, like, you feel like somebody's watching you and you'll look up and like the shadow just like sneaks behind the tree. They don't know how to explain that. There's nobody around. Like I said, there's a few hikers in the area, but like at nighttime, everybody usually goes home. In our park system, we do have varying times of closing times. So the area that we're in right now is technically, it closes at dusk. So we do have a group camp there. During normal operations, we do give them the courtesy of having the area to themselves so they're not disturbed. But by the mill, that closes at 11. So if you're going out to explore our parks, please make sure to call the park office to see if there's any limitations on times when you can be there at the park. So with that being said, there was nobody there, and he still doesn't really understand what he saw. He's like, it was dark, there was nobody around, and there was a shadow, and it just disappeared behind a tree. So that's really unique. Oh, sorry, my camera fell out of my hand there. It's always a good idea to look down while you're walking because there are rocks and roots that can trip you. I encourage people to take a flashlight with you because this trail, like I said, is really long. It's about 3 miles long if you complete the whole entire trail. So if you misjudge your time, you want a flashlight to get you back home, and as well as some bug spray because Beaver Creek is full of mosquitoes. Other tales of this area is the area used to be inhabited by the Wyandot and Mango Native Americans. So every once in a while, it's said that you can pick up like a picture of like, it looks like fog, but it's not. But it looks like the shape of a Native American in this area, which wouldn't surprise me because they were in this area. Down here in the gorge is where all the food and the water source is. So that's where they would be. So as we walk back here, I'm going to start talking about the story of Gretchen's Lock. Gretchen's Lock, it was built by Gretchen's father. I cannot think of his name right now. He came overseas from the mainland, and he brought his wife and his infant child. Now, during the trip over, his wife got really, really sick to the point that she died, and they buried her at sea. So it was just him and his daughter. And they came here, and he raised her as best as he could as a single father. So while he was working, the town's neighbors would watch out for her. And then he would come back home, and he would console her because she would be so distraught that she missed her mom. She just wanted her mother. And she would always cry for her mother. And he was like, one day, like, you'll be reunited with your mother. It's okay, I'm here now. And when the canals were finished in 1848, that's when they were going to go back home. Unfortunately, Gretchen did not make it. She caught malaria and died. And before the canal was finished, it was said that her dad entombed her in the top of this lock. With that being said, I'm going to throw a little caption out. Please don't destroy our property looking for bones. It's not good for our history of the park. But it is said that in this area of the lock that little Gretchen is still there. She can be heard, and it's ironic, on August 12th, that was her anniversary of her death, crying for her mother. So through these woods, you can hear a little girl just saying, I want to be with my mother. I want my mother. So, and as you get closer to the lock, it gets louder and louder. So it's really unique. But her body was actually unearthed. Her dad did take her back to the mainland like he promised. And while they were traveling overseas, they encountered a very terrible storm, which took the ship down. So we like to think that the whole family is now reunited, that mother, father, and child are together. But like I said, on August 12th, you can still sometimes hear that little girl in the woods as if she's making sure that this area is hers. So it's said that you can hear her, which is really neat. Another story of another lock in the area, which I didn't have time to get to, is Lusk Lock. And Lusk Lock has to be one of the prettiest locks that I know in the park system. It has 2 spiral staircases on the outside of it. I do have some pictures after this video of the lock itself. And Lusk Lock has another girl story. The area did have 2 young girls who did die during the building of the locks. And Mr. Lusk, it was said that he brought his wife over with his daughter, and he lived in a cabin above the lock itself. So he was right there on site. He was the engineer for that lock. And it was said that his wife was just tired of being in the woods. She hated being by herself in the woods. So one day after work, when he came home, he discovered that his wife was gone and that his little daughter was sleeping. Nobody knows where his wife went. She just up and vanished. So he was left to raise his daughter on his own. He took it upon the local neighbor for her to watch after little Margaret while he was working on the canals. And this is Gretchen's lock. And it was said that little Margaret would always be distraught, and she would get to the point where she made herself sick when she was crying for her dad. And the neighbor's like, I can't do this anymore. Like, she just nonstop cries. Like, you just need to take her home. Like, this isn't good for her. It's not good for us. Like, we can't handle this. So he's like, okay, I don't know what I'm going to do with a little girl and trying to build these locks. So he ends up taking her with him to work. Unfortunately, because she was so upset that her mother was gone and that her dad was always working, nobody really paid attention to her, that she came down with double pneumonia and contracted malaria as well. And that is what took her life. So it is said at Lusk Lock that she is still entombed in that lock. He did not take her back to the homeland. He actually stayed in the area. So in that area, you can actually hear a little girl too, laughing and giggling and playing as if she was entertaining herself while her dad was still building the locks. So we're walking back now, and now you can actually see some of the spookiness of this area. It gets quite dark. I don't know if you can hear the owl.
I
Right,
don't
right
think that we can hear your sound, Rochelle.
Oh no, that's unfortunate. So we did have like a little screech owl going in the background, which kind of sounds like a little creepy. And then at time they kind of sound like a sleeping bird, so they go. So it's really unique. So when you're down here, you have those sounds. You have like the katydids making their sounds and crickets, and it's just really neat. I really wish you guys could hear that sound. So another story with this area is the infamous Pretty Boy Floyd. And he was the local bank robber in the area, and as well as in Kansas, and this is Pretty Boy Floyd himself. It was said that he was visiting the town, and the FBI got wind that he was there. So he went to the field that I showed you that went really fast. I'm sorry about that. And this is Lusk Lock. But anyways, he went to the farm that used to be there, and the Conkles were the ones who owned that farm, and they invited him into the house where he paid for a meal, and then the brother of Mrs. Conkle was to give him a ride into town so he could catch a bus to get out of there. Well, unfortunately, as they were getting into the car to take him down to town, the FBI showed up, and he was actually gunned down in the field. He took off running, and they gunned him down. So it said on October 23rd, the day that he did die, that in that area you can actually do EPVs and you can get him to talk back to you. And it's really fun because everybody called him Pretty Boy Floyd, and he didn't like that. He was like, no, my name is Charles Floyd. So some people have actually caught him saying that, my name is Charles Floyd. So a way to entice him is to call him Pretty Boy Floyd, and he'll actually speak to you. It's a really unique feeling. I did it. Unfortunately, my phone wouldn't let me update my EPV video. But I was back in the corner where he was supposedly gunned down, and I said, hey, Pretty Boy Floyd, are you here? And I kid you not, my EPV went crazy. It was going off the charts, and I'm like, I don't know how to explain this. I'm the only one here. But yeah, it was a little creepy. Like I said, we're in a remote location. There is no light pollution. There's hardly cars going down the road. It's just really unique. So this is Lusk Lock right here, and those pretty staircases that I was talking about. And it said that at the top of the lock, I forget what side, is where little Margaret is buried still to this day. But please don't try to look for her bones because you will ruin the beautiful stonework that we have there. If you go to our park, in the main park, let me see if I can go back a little bit. We do have a Pioneer Village. So this is our Pioneer Village. And we used to have an old resident, or like an old house there, and it was Miss Williams' house. And she was allowed to live in that house until she passed on. And unfortunately, the house has burnt down. It is no longer there. The Friends group is building another log cabin, which is really neat. But in this house, I've had stories of people who would go in and clean it on the regular. And if they would move something out of place, Miss Williams would put it back So it was really unique. Like they would rearrange, try to spruce it up a little bit, and they would go back the next time and it would be completely back to the way it was originally. And they would ask each other, like, did you move that? And they're like, no, I didn't touch that. And they're like, okay. So the thing was that Miss Williams liked her house a certain way and don't mess with it. We did have some good EPV and some orb photos at that location as well. So there's lots of ghost history at Beaver Creek. So if you ever have a chance to go down, it's next to East Liverpool, Ohio. It is super fun to go down there. Please remember that the park does close at 11, and to take your imagination with you and to see what you can discover down there. And we love hearing stories. We too also have Bigfoot. So we do have people that search for Bigfoot in our area as well, or Grassman as we like to call them. So if you have any cool stories or any tales that you would like to say, please drop them in the Q&A box. We'd love to hear them.
Rochelle, we do have a question, somebody asking about the locks on the canal. Do you know how they work?
Yeah, so the canals was a system of water, and to keep water inside of it, they had, and for the elevation differences that they had to go through, they had to create locks and dams. So these locks, let me see if I can go back a little bit more. Oh, too far, that wrong way. Okay, so these locks would hold the water back. So if you look right past the stairways, there's like a little void in the wall. That is actually where wooden gates would open and close. And they would hold back the water and like lower the canal boat up and down, depending on which way they were going. So with elevation differences, up near Lake Erie, it would be higher, and as you got down closer to East Liverpool, it would be lower. So if they would just let the water flow freely, we would be all out of water and the canals would run dry. So these locks would hold back the water and prevent the canal system from draining completely. The Sandy and Beaver Canal is very unique, as we were actually, we have two tunnels. We have a small tunnel and the big tunnel. And just like its description says, we went through the mountains. It was easier and it cut off mileage. But as you can imagine, most of our canal boats were drawn by donkeys or cows. We did have a few kerosene and steam engine boats that did frequent the area, but most of them were towboats, so they had to be towed by something. When it came to the tunnels, it was literally men laying on their backs and walking sideways, like sideways stepping, to get the boat to move it through the tunnel. So that was really unique. And then we also had aqueducts. So those, when we came across like the river, we didn't really want to use the river. We just wanted to go across it and not have to interfere with the river's flow. We would build a wooden bridge that would have a water trough at the top of it per se, and that's where the boats would continue on their way. So that was really unique. I hope I answered the question there.
And Joe was wondering, who's the guy in the window behind you?
I forgot to say that some of the staff in the olden days did see like a hanging lumberjack fellow hanging, so it could be him. I gotta look real quick. You just never know in this building. I mean, there's so many cool stories behind it. I'm actually surprised my computer is still functioning well, because it said that electronics just go haywire. And like I said, this library is like a hot spot for activity. So.
Yeah, that was a good one. I have to give it to Joe on that.
Hey, Michelle, this is Jenna. There's somebody else asked like what, and you've talked about it a little bit, just like what experiences you've had and what you've seen in the manor. And I had to laugh because that brought up to me our experience in New Orleans.
Yes. Oh, yes, with the orbs. Like I said, I mean, I really wish I had a better experience on last year's Halloween. I think I was just too exhausted. So, I mean, they could have been messing with me in the room and I just didn't know it because I slept through it. But yeah, at the parks, I would definitely say at Beaver Creek, I've had several times where I felt like something was watching me. Not sure who or what. Your hair kind of stands up. And like I said, with being out there and calling Pretty Boy Floyd a pretty boy, my EPV did go off. He did not like that at all. I'm really curious. I want to go back out on October 23rd to see if I get more activity from him, because that is his anniversary of his death. So that'll be unique. And as Jenna was saying, we did have the opportunity to go to New Orleans. And this is some of the pictures that we had taken. And Jenna, do you want to explain?
Sure. So if you ever get a chance to go to New Orleans, do it. It's a fantastic town. The history is just amazing. And Rochelle and I went there 2 years ago for a professional conference of naturalists and interpreters. And of course, we had to take the ghost tour. So these pictures here, I cannot remember the name of the restaurant to save my life right now, but it's in. Do you, by any chance, Rochelle?
No, that's why I sent it to you.
Yeah, it was almost 2 years ago, but yeah, there is a restaurant in the French Quarter, and I know these pictures are a little small and might be a little bit hard to see, but back here, what you're looking at is a hallway, and at the end of the hallway is a table with a place setting. So the story here is when the owners were redoing the restaurant, they bought the building, they wanted to renovate. So they started moving things around and the renovation just went terribly. Like everything they did, they would come in the morning and a wall that they put up would have, all the plaster would have fallen off of it. Their equipment would be thrown all over the place. If there was a ladder, it would have fallen over. Just the renovation was just plagued by problems. And since this is New Orleans, one of the most haunted cities around, they called in some specialists and said, can you tell us what's going on here? And they were able to make contact with a gentleman who had lived in the building previously and, discovered that he was just very angry, kind of like Rochelle was talking about the lady in the Pioneer Village. He did not like seeing his house rearranged. And so what the ghost hunters and mediums suggested to the owners was that they make a place for the gentleman who used to own the building. So they set aside a room and they set a table for this gentleman. And once they made a space for him, their problems disappeared and the renovation finished easily. So they still to this day have a place set at the table for him. And there's a hallway as you're walking by, there's sort of like a little alleyway, and you can look down and see this place setting. And when Rochelle and I were there on our tour, we took pictures. And when I looked at my pictures, if you see right here, we don't know what that is. It's, one of the things they would describe as an orb. We must have been with 20 other people, all taking the same picture at the same time, same angles. And nobody else had that. And I took a series of pictures, just one after another. And that's the only place where this showed. And Rochelle and I, being scientists at heart, decided that we would go back because it was kind of bothering us that we couldn't explain this and what this was on the picture and where it came from. So we went back same night. And I know this is going to be really hard to see because the picture is kind of small on the screen, but back here underneath the table, you can kind of see one of them. There are some light orbs under the table when we went back. They're sort of bluish green. On the original picture, there's 3 of them under the table. And again, it's like same picture, just at a different time. We convinced ourselves that it was just reflections off the camera because that was a comfortable explanation for 2 women walking around New Orleans in the dark. So not a state park, but an experience that Rochelle and I shared.
And then, like, to throw in another state park, I know at Wingfoot, my nature center, there's a little girl in there. I've heard her before. So my manager, his office used to be in there, and he said that she's thrown papers around. And nobody really likes to come to my nature center. Like the maintenance guys, they don't really care to come over there, so it's a little spooky for them. But I enjoy it. She's harmless. She's a sweet little girl. She doesn't bother us too much. She just makes noises. That's all.
Well, thank you, Rochelle. If anybody has any questions, please let us know. But I think that we will be wrapping it up soon. I do want to say that Columbiana County, and I didn't even know these stories existed about Beaver Creek, but I was in Columbiana County maybe 3 Halloweens ago, and I had quite a spooky experience. So I'm kind of sold on what you told us here today, Rochelle. I went to go get gas. It was Halloween night. And I mean, where do you see people that pump your gas for you these days? I live in the Columbus area, and I can't think of any place around here where you can go and get your gas pumped for you. When I was younger, that used to, you'd see it around some places, but the gas tank didn't even have a digital gauge on it. It was those numbers that, kind of circled around as the gas pumped. And we went back and told a couple of our friends who were up there with us, a couple of them that actually lived there in Columbiana County, and they're like, "What are you talking about? There is no place here that you can get your gas pumped for you." And my friend who I was with, I mean, we both just turned like white as a ghost and looked at each other, and we're like, "Did that really just happen?" And they said, "There used to be a place, but it's been closed for 20 years. So we were convinced that a friendly ghost had pumped our gas that evening. And that wasn't too far from Beaver Creek. But
did you have to pay?
Oh, what was that, Rochelle?
Did you have to pay?
I paid in cash. They only took cash there. It was weird.
Oh, go take cash. Okay.
Thank you all for joining us today, and thank you, Rochelle and Jenna, for your help. We hope you enjoyed it, and we'll see you next week. Bye.